teach a course, I'd like to start the first class with an overview of what we're going to do throughout the course, right? So not just a preview of the different topics, but an overview that gives a picture of the whole. So sort of like if you use Google for directions, it's a good idea not just to look where you start or where you're going to finish, but you want to look at that whole route just briefly before you begin. Not just so that you don't accept directions that take you off on some wild goose chase. Google will do that to you if you're not careful. Mostly because you want to understand each of your right turns and left turns and know where they fit in the big picture of what you're trying to accomplish, where you're really trying to go. Just looking at the destination almost isn't enough. We have to look at some way, look at the journey. And so when I teach a class, I want the student to be able to know where each piece of information, each thing that we struggle to learn and understand, where it fits in a big picture, mostly because it's easier for a student, it's easier for us to learn if we know where to put the information. I think it's true also that it's easier to live if we know where we're putting the choices in terms of our big goals. And our church does that for us this week as we begin the liturgical year, this first Sunday of Advent. We have a place to go, right? And we're not just going to follow certain directions for each step. And we're not just remembering things from 2,000 years ago or looking forward to some things in some future time when after wars and insurrections and great signs in the sky, right? We're doing something this year. We have a year lined out ahead of us. We have a goal, a destination. We're going to do a lot of things along the way, and they all fit into that goal. So the liturgical year, as we begin, proposes to us that what we want to do, above all else, is to be awake for the Lord's return, right? That the Lord is coming and that we need to be awake for his return. It sounds a lot like what we did last week for Christ the King, but it's different. Last week, he was coming in power and glory in the end times. Today, we've zoomed out, like you can do with Google Earth, right? And started to see the contours of the land and the continents and then the globe, right? And the whole globe is this waiting for the Lord's return. And what that means and what that looks like and how each of our steps will fit into that process so that as we await his return at the end times, it's not about waiting for something that might not happen for another couple of thousand years or longer, right? It's about waiting for his return in glory in my life this year. And when we talk about his arrival in his great signs of the Father's love, I have to be watching this year for those signs of the Father's love so that I can fit his arrival into my experience of this liturgical year. And as we study his teachings, we're not just learning some sayings from an old book. We're trying to identify the ways that God is with us in these words and teachings. And as we prepare for his birth, and as we prepare for his pregnancy, even during our Advent celebration, for Mary's pregnancy, and that time of awaiting, we're not just remembering or pretending about something in the past. We're invited to find the way to welcome his growing presence and his birth into our lives. Now, we could say he already came, but did he? Like if you look at my selfishness, if you look at my pride, if you look at the ways that I take advantage of others, if you look at the selfishness and struggles of our world, has he come? Or is he still to come? Is God with us? Yes. But this year, will God be with us in a new way? Will God come to his people, to me, in a new way? If I'm awake, if I'm ready. And so we are engaged by the challenge of today's scriptures as we begin the year. Not a challenge so much for this week, but a challenge for the year. To open our hearts, to be ready, to be watchful, to be awake as the Lord comes. It's hard to live our lives fully awake, right? You and I know that we would say, at least in principle, that it's better to be awake and to engage life and to live in the present. But we also know that that can be challenging. There was a year, I don't know that it was 2 full years of my life, when almost every morning getting up was hard. And not so much because I wasn't getting enough sleep, that's probably true also, but it's because I didn't want to face the struggles and difficulties of the day, and sleeping was easier, right? There are moments in our lives where drowsiness would overcome us, but we're invited to re-engage and to be awake and find the ways that getting up in the morning is better, and finding the ways that love overcomes, and that awaiting love is a hopeful, not a fearful way of building our lives. Like that these are, I think, things that we should be invited to consider in this overview of our liturgical year. We'll have a lot of rituals, like we might pray before meals, and we might say a rosary or a Divine Mercy chaplet daily or on a regular basis. We might have our regular times for the Sacrament of Reconciliation. We might attend Sunday Mass. Like these are all rituals designed to help us stay awake. But we would be reminded as we begin this liturgical year that sometimes even our rituals can lull us into sleep rather than help us to be awake. The call of this Sunday's scriptures, the call of this liturgical year as it unfolds, is to be awake to the Lord's coming, to be awake to his presence in the ways that he came in the past and that he'll come in the future, but much more importantly in the ways that as that story unfolds, he makes himself present in my life, this Advent, this liturgical year.